Hello, everybody. I'm Ray Samich, along with Ratanjit Sondhe, and welcome to this edition of Stress-Free Living. Ratanjit, how are you this fine day?
Wonderful, Ray. I got my second shot yesterday of
Okay,
COVID, but I have no side effects so far. Keep my fingers crossed. So,
very good. You look great. I know some people have had some issues with getting the vaccines, but you have made it through, looks like both shots without any problem at all. That's good.
yeah.
Very good.
How are
So
you feeling?
I'm fine, thank you. We all have our little health issues that we have to go through, but nothing serious, and I'm doing great. Thanks for asking. Well, Ratanji, I think you have an interesting topic that you have brought to the table here today, something that we all feel from time to time, and that is anger. Sometimes we just, maybe this COVID situation is making us angry. A lot of people are stuck in their houses for months on end. A lot of people have been seriously affected financially because they've lost their job or they've lost some of the hours that they used to work. Maybe some of their expenses have gone up and their income has gone down. There's all kinds of reasons why people get angry. And I think we've seen more anger in the world over the last year. Maybe we ideally would like to think that we're coping with this by being more compassionate and kinder. We've addressed that in some recent shows, but I think the reality is that more of us get angry more quickly because of our frustration and our, I don't know, just our feelings of hopelessness. So let's talk about anger today if we can. And is there a place for it? Are we supposed to control it all the time? Are we supposed to, is it okay once in a while to let it out and get angry? We never seem to feel good about using it. Whenever we get angry afterwards, at least in my case, I feel guilty afterwards, like I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have gotten angry. So is it ever appropriate in our human lives to be angry?
To understand anger, we have to realize why do we get angry to begin with. So one of the main cause of our anger comes from if somebody has minimized us, hurt our ego.
Mm-hmm.
Immediately we react. If somebody tells you a bad name or calls, so immediately the anger comes in and you confront them. How can you say that? So that is typically that is one predominant
Yeah.
side of, and that should be controlled. That really results into if you react, it's like putting fuel in the fire. So then it results into a fight because you are going to react, you are going to go one notch higher to insult that person more than what she or he has insulted you. So this is not the right thing. And so at that point, and the other reason of getting angry is that when you're not well, your body is compromised, your health is compromised, you have less tolerance, you are more irritated to begin with. So at that point, any little thing can irritate you and bring anger in you. And
At some point, it doesn't have to be a physical.
it can be mental.
It could be mental. It could be pressure,
could be
stress.
stress. You have
Right.
could be stress. And
Right.
if you have lost your job or you have things are hard, so you're more likely to be in that position
Right.
to get angry. And and thirdly is before I go to the third, you want to talk about these two
Well,
first?
yeah, but I don't want you to forget about what the third is. Do you want to get it out and then we'll come back to it?
Okay. The third one is when really some gross injustice is done, and not only you are affected, but your human race is affected, and that is a justifiable anger. But that anger you cannot express at you can express at anybody. You can the two things happen at that point. You start playing the blame game and start condemning others, or you take charge of correcting that. So at that point, that anger can be used as a force, a power available to you to transform or to change, bring about the change.
Okay. Okay, so you brought out three different scenarios here. So let's go back and look at those three, and then we'll end up with that third one, of course. But the first one, I would think that that's the one that most of us get angry with. That's the one that probably is the scenario that most of us face on a regular basis. And you mentioned, as a little kid, somebody calling you a mean name. That's maybe what it starts with when we're 8 years old. But in life, it may not be a name that they're calling us, but they still insulted us. They underestimated, undervalued us, underappreciated us, whatever it might be. And that gets us angry. So you're saying that that's basically our ego talking.
Yes.
Okay, that is responding to that. But I always talk to you about just being human. We're just human beings trying to play the same game, and those things hurt. I mean, when we have worked on a certain project, and our boss fails to appreciate what we have done and doesn't think that it was done properly, and disregards our abilities, it hurts. So when we feel anger and we try to control it, we don't necessarily yell back. We don't necessarily criticize whoever wasn't nice to us, but we have that feeling of anger inside. I mean, how do we not have that feeling? How do we control and say, this doesn't matter?
So let's divide that ego-based thing into several sections.
Okay.
One is that outright insult. Somebody just throws words at you and insults you, and then all that, or something you have done with great meaning and great effort, and somebody says, "Oh, it's not good. You are useless, and you're that." So when somebody critiques you, justifiably or unjustifiably, at that point, rather than getting immediately defensive, realize that is a very valuable information available to you. So look deeply into, detach yourself from you and look deeply into, is there any way you could have done better? Is there room for improvement? So that there is always room for improvement. So that critique, that insult can help you elevate yourself. And once you are on that path, then really you can work under any environment. And it is many times when you work under a tough boss and you have no choice, you end up improving.
Yes.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
when you see that I have no choice, so then you accept that this is his habit. He gets angry. So then whenever he or she gets angry, you evaluate whether this was done rightly. Is there something I can do to improve? Or is it just he had a bad day or she had a bad day? So then you cope with that situation much better rather than reacting to it. If you react to it, many times you have missed a great opportunity to improve yourself, and you end up leaving the job, going somewhere else. You still confront the same problem in a maybe lesser way or even worse way. So the thing we have to remember is that the only entity we have any control on is ourselves. We do not control others, but our whole thought process is, I want you to behave. I want you to be nice. So that doesn't work.
You know, I think this is worth talking about a little further, because your whole motto is add the highest value. And we've talked about that all the time. And we talk about how that's not as easy as just adding value. It takes more work to really dig deeper and figure out how to add the highest value.
Right.
And I think there's a parallel here, because if someone insults me, and if my initial response is simply, well, you're just being crazy and there's no justification. I know I did a good job on that, and there's no reason that you should think it wasn't good, because it was really good. And if I just drop it right there, then nothing has happened positive out of that at all.
Right.
But if I do take that, as you said, as a springboard to say, you know what, let me look a little deeper into this. Let me see. Maybe he was crazy. Maybe, you know, I'll find out after looking more deeply into this thing, that it really was perfect. But chances are, if I look into it a little bit more deeply, I'll find out that there were parts of this that I could have done better. There were angles here that I could have pursued that would have added more value to that project that I was working on. And if you do even open the door of that possibility, you could see how that would control your anger then, because don't get angry yet, you know, take a look at this, because maybe there's legitimacy here. And you'll probably find out that there is at least some, if not a lot of legitimacy to that situation. So that kind of does go well with what you always say with, you know, looking to add value. If my first response is that I'm angry, you're crazy, this was perfect. Well, on the surface, that sounds great, but in the real world, that's probably not what happened because there is no perfection. We probably could have done it better. See,
in our team, in my company, we had these bright managers, very, well educated, very bright. So we want to find a solution to a problem. So when we put together and somebody would come up with this idea, somebody come up with a different idea. So whoever ideas was not accepted would get upset, right? So then say, what is any reason for me to think, because you're not going to accept it? So then we decided, I brought in different color caps, yellow, red, white, green, and so on. And I asked, I said, when you are angry, wear the red cap and express. You can call me any name. So I'm upset, you are idiot, you are this and that. I understand you are angry in that mode. And when you are in the creative mode, you have new idea, wear the green cap. And tell us what your new idea is. And then if you want to wear a caution, you want to critique somebody, wear a yellow hat and say this idea is not correct because of this reason or this reason and this reason. And now, once they started playing those roles, they also started realizing that they are not one person, their thought processes. So they started getting detached to their ideas. And then we would discuss ideas openly and nobody would get upset. So we became a very creative environment by detaching ourselves from the idea. And you see, it's like in our marketing, when we wanted to come up with a particular logo or particular name or particular slogan. So we'll say, okay, normally people write one slogan or one idea. We say, no, write one idea, now detach yourself. Come up with another one, detach yourself. Come up with the third one. So you become an entity of creative ideas. So now you are not attached to any of these ideas. So then we look at all these things and see which one is more powerful. Otherwise, people just come up with one idea and they get stuck with that idea. And if that idea is not taken, you are angry because your ego is hurting. So there are ways to get away from this ego mode, but ultimately it is the ego which you have to realize.
I love the cat idea because, if someone had to reach across the table because they were feeling anger, they had to reach across the table and they had to get that red angry cap,
Right.
and go through the motion. Then that gave them enough time in there to say, gee, is this me or is this anger talking? And is this even legitimate then to talk about this just because it's coming out of anger? I mean, I wish we could almost, maybe we can. I mean, figuratively, we don't, we don't actually have a cap that we carry in our pocket, but maybe we should kind of pretend that we do. And we say,
I wear a red turban. I'm always angry.
You're not angry. I haven't seen you angry very often in 30 years. Almost never, I think. But if we could actually say, you know what, if I had to put a red cap on right now to tell the world that I'm speaking out of anger,
right,
would I do it? Would I be willing to put that red cap on right now to admit to everybody that I am coming from a moment of anger? I think a lot of us would say, no, I don't think I'm going to do that. I think let me think these words through and these emotions through and do it from a different colored cap of normalcy and stability, because but we don't, of course. I mean, it's in a way I'm being silly because the anger takes us over so much that we're not thinking reasonably. We're not thinking logically at that point.
and then we had a white hat, which was basically verifiable facts.
Oh,
So
okay.
there's no dispute that those everybody agrees on those. So that this way we, all right, put a white hat and tell me. So then what comes out of you have to make sure that those are verifiable facts. So it's very intriguing, and they loved it because it was a game. It
Yeah,
became a
right.
game.
Yeah. No, I can appreciate that. I had not heard about that methodology before, but that makes a lot of sense. We are talking this morning on Stress-Free Living about anger. And stress often makes us angry. That was the second type of anger that Ratanjit alluded to. We're going to come back in just a moment and talk more about that type of anger, and a little more probably about the ego anger as well. And ultimately, can anger do us well? Can we accomplish something? Can there be some benefit from this anger emotion within us? Those are things we'll talk about on this edition of Stress-Free Living. Please stay with us.
I like your Hawaiian shirt. My goodness.
Well, I put it on. I dug it out of the closet because of the background.
Yeah.
So,
but you look handsome anyways, no matter what you wear.
Oh, you're so crazy. But thank you for being kind.
You're calling me names already?
I am.
My ego is getting hurt.
So get it. Yeah, get angry. Get angry. I don't know if I've ever seen you angry. I said rarely, but I'm not sure I ever saw you angry. Had to be once or twice over.
I'm a mean guy. Ask Dolly. She'll tell you I get angry all the time.
Okay. Well, you hide it well. Okay, so I think we've talked through the ego part of it. I think let's move on to this, which, interesting enough, I think this is going to take the second. Let's see, how do I say this?
The second one is when you are compromised health-wise.
But the recipient of it needs to be a bigger part of that second scenario.
See, when you are sick, you go to a doctor.
Yeah.
and you misbehave because you're sick, doctor understand that you are not yourself.
Right, right,
So once you realize you're not well, then you have to be sympathetic, and that's where uh, empathy comes in.
right,
So absence of empathy
right.
will generate ego, and ego and empathy cannot coexist. So, but again, you have to remind me of things. I don't remember all these things in the show.
Well, that's why I think that the recipient has to be much more empathetic, forgiving, kind, tolerant, patient
Yes.
in those scenarios. So that's good. Um, Maybe after we talk that one through, we can go back to the idea of detaching, because you referred to detaching earlier, but we didn't go into that.
All right.
But maybe the detaching, then you could talk about for both the scenario one as the person who gets angry and scenario two as the person who is the recipient of the anger, to detach themselves from those situations, you know, be that third person that looks at themselves. So if you follow that line of thought, we can come back to that afterwards. But let's talk about the second scenario first.
Okay.
We are back on Stress Free Living. Ratanjit Sondhe and yours truly, Ray Samish, with you. Thank you for sharing your time with us today as we are talking about anger. Actually, it was a suggestion from one of our listeners asking us why we get angry and is there some benefit to getting angry. And so that's what we're talking through here today. Ratanjit, so the first type of anger that we've talked about is based on
Ego.
our ego.
So there
And
is a consequence of ego. When you are in the ego mode, Ray, we have completely lost the capacity of being empathetic. Means I cannot experience your pain, your suffering, or what you feel like. Empathy is our capability to understand what other person is feeling. And when you are in the ego mode, it becomes depends on how much of ego is empowering you. Your empathy becomes almost zero. This is scientifically proven. I think I have given that example many times when the brain, which is basically mirror neurons, which are reflective, and when you have mirror neuron activity in your brain, you have empathy. And when you are ego, when they ask people to write an essay on gratefulness or the difficulty they felt and they are grateful for, and they ask them to write essay what they have achieved, what they are proud of. And the people, and then after the writing the essay, they transform their thinking into pride or gratefulness. And and when they measure after that their mirror neuron activities, they found no activity in the brain of people who were feeling proud. So pride and ego are coming from the same angle. So we in the last show we talked about
and I'm sorry, but empathy, just to close that thought though, because the important part was that the empathy, people that had been grateful, people that had undergone challenges, were able then to feel and experience the empathy for others.
yes.
Okay, which is so important to state, just because that is, I think, something that we all want to do. We all want to be able to have that empathy towards other people around us, and you can't have that if you are parked in ego and pride.
So the real understanding we should all have is that all our successes, which we claim that I succeed, I achieved this, I did this, are never because of us alone. They are being helped by the environment, by other people, and the conditions. So all our successes are in spite of us, never because of us. So that takes away your ego, brings the ego down and brings you into gratefulness. You see these gold medalist athletes when they run a gold medal race, and at the end of the race, the burden of that victory is so much. They bow on their legs and
Yeah, yeah.
give it the credit to the divine forces or their God or who they believe in. So it is always because of all these other things which are helping us. This human body itself is gifted to us. We have no contract. And how it functions, the air, oxygen, if it is not available, it'll die. So you give credit to the oxygen, you give credit to the warmth you are in. If it is no sun comes out, you are completely frozen. This body cannot operate. So there are so many elements which allow you to perform or bring creativity, and we don't really think about that. We take those things for granted. We are never grateful for any of those things. So the recipe of getting out of the ego mode is stay parked in gratefulness. And it is in the gratefulness you will have empathy. And you will realize when somebody is mad at you. You remember the incident right after September 11, when great tragedy happened in New York, and
Mhm.
and we were all devastated. We were all angry. We were all frustrated. And on, I remember September 13th, it was 2 days later, I was coming from office in the evening, and my wife asked me to stop by at the grocery store to pick up some vegetables. And I was in the grocery store, and this young woman is looking at me, and ultimately she couldn't control her anger. She comes to me and says, "Why don't you go back to your country? Leave us alone." And she was shivering. She was so angry.
Mhm.
At that time, if I had my ego controlling me, I would have shouted back at her. But I was parked in empathy, fortunately. And I said, "Ma'am, I realize your pain. I am also suffering the same pain. And if by spanking me, by hitting me, or by getting angry at me, shouting at me, reduces your pain, please go ahead. But please realize we are into it all together. And it is by being together we can survive." And she started crying like a child and came and hugged me. And now in the store, by then, this noise was going around. People who were looking at, they all came and started hugging each other.
Yeah.
So that is the power of empathy. But empathy allows you to understand why somebody is upset. It allows others to be upset. We don't hold the grudge against them. We don't reciprocate with the same anger. But you will do that if you are parked in ego.
Right. So, there are many times when we are angry that we disregard the feelings of other people, and we say things in those moments that we ultimately do come back and regret,
Right.
especially if it's with a family member or a friend or a child or whatever it might be, and we say something, out of the frustration, the heat of the moment, and afterwards, when we're by ourselves, when we do have those regrets for the words that we spoke, we actually ask ourselves, how in the world did I even say that? How for example, I love my wife so much, and why would I say that to her? But now you kind of explained how that's possible, because in the moment of total ego, when ego has totally overwhelmed us and that's all we can think of, we're not thinking about anybody else's feelings. We're not thinking about anybody else's, any aspect of them. We're only thinking about ourselves in that moment.
Yeah, at that moment, the main thing we have to remind ourselves is every moment of our life, we should remind ourselves that my purpose of life is to add the highest value. So now if somebody is shouting at me, I have to ask, what do I do? Should I, he's or she is wrong. I haven't done this. So I should defend myself. Now, when I go into defense mode, that is ego mode. And when I come into empathy mode and then realize that my role doesn't change, my role is still to add the highest value. So then you ask, under this condition, how do I add the highest value? And many times you may have to agree with that anger that is expressed. It says, you are right. I should have thought about it. I should have. So diffuse that anger.
Mm-hmm.
And that is how the closeness happened between these two people. If you react to that anger, people who love each other become enemies. But if we react passionately, understand that whatever is bothering them, and many times, Ray, the second part, that is their health is compromised, they may not be feeling well, they may be irritated, and their fuse is so short, and anything little bit can put them into the anger mode. So we have to understand that. That's why when you go to a doctor and you are reacting violently, the doctor realizes that you're running 105 degrees temperatures, you have no control.
Right.
So they don't defend you, they control you, and they give you a medication.
Yeah. So you know what, and you've touched briefly there quickly on the second type of anger, which is when we're not ourselves, and for a physical reason, a stress reason, like we talked earlier. It doesn't justify the anger, but it explains the anger so that there's a reason for it. And so, and that does happen, and it happens, it's a fact of life. It happens for all ages, but it certainly happens more as people get older because there are physical changes, there are mental changes for people as we age. And so those physical restrictions often cause less patience and less understanding, total frustration for a lot of people that used to be able to do everything anytime they wanted to, and suddenly now they're stuck. They can't drive, they can't get out of the house, they can't, maybe they can't get out of a wheelchair, or whatever the case might be. There's physical restrictions. There's a lot of emotional, mental restrictions. Maybe they've undergone serious losses with the loss of a longtime spouse or whatever. I mean, there's all kinds of reasons why people now suddenly are more prone to be angry and more prone to show that anger. So in all of these, though, that you've just talked about, whether it's the first type with ego, whether it's the second type with more physical or emotional reasons, I'm hearing that the recipient of the anger is a much more important piece in this process than I ever thought before. What the reaction is from the recipient of the anger is really as much, if not more, of a key than the person who gets angry. Yeah. You always blow me away whenever I come back and I call you up and I say, I've got this problem I'm dealing with, and you always say, the first thing I should do is be grateful that the problem came to me. And I'm saying, are you crazy? I'm not going to be grateful I got another problem, but this is, but that's how you always start the conversation. I love you. I'm not calling you crazy, but I'm making a point. But it's like, I can't think about being thankful for a problem. Okay.
Yes.
But in a way, I think you're also saying now that we should be thankful in a way when people are angry with us,
Yes.
because it's an opportunity for us to not only diffuse the anger, but also to find out why the anger is there and maybe have a long-term solution for it.
Yes. See, as a recipient of anger, somebody is angry with you and all that. So you have an amazing, just like that problem you have, should be grateful. You have an opportunity to add value to that person, to that situation. You are able to comprehend, you are able to realize. And many times people are angry and we always play the blame game. And that all comes from ego. So I didn't do that. And he said this to me, he said this to me, she said this to me, and we multiply that and we forget what we said. And in this process, we are playing in our society, Ray, we are less than 5%, 4.39% population of the world. And we have in prisons, we have 25, 26% people of the population of the world in prison. So we very quickly punish people. When something goes wrong, we are looking for whose fault it is and punish that person. It is absence of oneness. We don't realize that the power which enlivens all of us is exactly the same. We are all in the same boat. We are all affecting each other. So if you are hammering a nail and if you hit your thumb, are you going to sue your right hand, which had the hammer? Or are you going to hit back the right hand? You're going to hurt yourself. So instead of putting people in prison, we should understand why they did that. Maybe there are mental disorders, there may be a difficult situation they are going through, they are depressed, they're lonely, all these situations can cause people to do crazy things. But we don't worry about those things. We immediately want to punish them.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we look our society, where are we? As a consequence of that thinking, we are so divided. We are crucifying each other. And we are more angry than any time in the history. The human race is more angry than any other time in the history.
You're saying right now, on top of with the pandemic and with all of the
with everything,
social unrest and everything.
So we are constantly blaming.
Yeah.
We are blaming the government, we are blaming the science, we are blaming this, and we are blaming corporations. And yes, there is fault to go around with all these entities. And again, ultimately, when ego is controlling every decision, the consequence of that thinking is, what is in it for me? And when corporations are thinking, what is in it for me? Regardless of what it does to the public, when our politicians are thinking, what is in it for me? Regardless of what is happening to the people. So in that mode, you are going to create nothing but problems. So ultimately, we have to think as one. What affects you affects me, directly or indirectly.
All right, when we come back, we have one more break here. When we come back, we're going to talk just a little bit more about this idea of being the recipient, what we can do, and how we can handle it in the oneness mode. But then we're also going to talk for a few minutes about maybe the cases when anger is justified. And some of the great leaders of the world that have used that anger in a very positive way to make legitimate change. This is Stress-Free Living, and we're talking about anger today. Ratanjit, Sondhe, Ray Samich. We'll be right back with you. Okay. So we went a little long, so we're going to come back. 46, we'll have about 13 minutes. So I wanted to make sure we talked thoroughly about
Positive side of anger.
Yeah, the positive. Yeah, so I want to get into that. But I also, I don't know if we've made, boy, I want to make sure that we drive home one more time the importance of the recipient of the anger. I just want to follow up with that one more time, because I think we always feel the victim. We always feel that we're the victim by being the recipient, and we don't think that, we think we're powerless. We think that we're, maybe the best we can do is turn our cheek and walk away, but there's actually so much more we can do. So I just want to just dwell on that just a little bit more, because you've opened up that idea that I never thought of before. I'm sure most people haven't. We make it all about the person who's showing us anger. We don't think at all that we have a role to play in that.
Yes.
So I think we need to just pound that home a little bit more, and then move on to, and obviously Gandhi is a premier example of that.
Yes.
Okay.
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 Are we there yet?
Nope.
Sitting in the car and like kids, are we there yet, Daddy?
Yeah, right. Yeah. Daddy, are we there yet? No. I would say this is the last ad.
See, my biggest complaint people have about me is that I have not grown up.
Well, I think that's a good thing. I think got a lot of kid in me too. That's good.
So give me a certificate so I can show people. See, I'm good.
I give you a new cap.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like that idea. I don't think you ever told me about that meeting.
So you should start wearing a turban. That's the secret.
That would solve my hair problem.
And people know when you're wearing a red turban, but watch out, today he's going to be angry.
Yeah. Boy, then I have to work to be angry all day. That would be hard.
See, there's other side which we didn't cover.
We are back on Stress-Free Living, and Ratanjit, Sondhe, and Ray Samich with us here today. Ratanjit, we have a short period of time. We've been talking a lot here today, so we don't have much time left. But I wanted to go back one last time on the importance of the recipient of anger, because I think so many times when we are that recipient, we freeze up. We consider ourselves a victim. We want to retaliate. We want to shout back out, no, it's not my fault, or you're the stupid one, or whatever the response might be that we just have a logical response to. And I don't think we realize that we have an opportunity in that mode to actually add incredible value, not only to the moment, in diffusing the moment, but actually in helping the person who was showing that anger. Because as you've talked about here today, in a way that anger might be their way of reaching out and letting somebody in the world know that there is a problem.
Yes.
That was otherwise hidden. And so if we're the ones in that situation to actually say, oh my gosh, this person has maybe a health issue, maybe they have an emotional issue, maybe they just have a problem that's going on in their life that is bringing them to a boiling point, whatever the scenario might be, we're like we talked about in a unique position perhaps to help and truly make a difference in that person's life. So you always tell me to kind of step out of my body when I'm in difficult situations. And when you first threw that idea by me, I kind of said, I can't do that, but you've helped me to learn how to do it. Explain what you mean by that for our audience. When they're in a tough situation, they can actually disconnect and watch themselves, right?
Well, see, the realization that I live in this human body, and the brain and human body is gifted to me. So the moment I come out of it, and that me, which comes out of body and looks at this human body, what is saying, what it is performing, is a neutral divine power, which is same as exists in the person who is getting mad at me. So that gives you a neutral understanding what is happening here. You are not attached to the situation. So it's like I walked into a store. It was very, this was in Switzerland. And this gentleman walked in very angry at the store managers. He was speaking in the local language, and I couldn't understand, but I couldn't realize that he was very angry. So I saw the reaction of that person receiving that anger was very calm and very quiet, and basically understood what was wrong, admitted, sir, this was wrong, and this would be corrected, and so on. And pretty soon that person calmed down, and then suddenly he realized, and he said, "Look, I'm sorry, I maybe spoken some bad words." But all that happens because the other person was not reacting to that.
Right.
And so similarly, but realize, Ray, without empathy, you cannot separate yourself and see others' point of view. It is very important that you have to first understand others before you can make them understand you. Whereas in our communication, what we call as communication is constantly, I can't wait before you shut down and give my point of view. I'm only part on my point of view. I'm not listening to others.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas when somebody is talking to you, whether they are angry, if they are angry, if we repeat that anger, says you are angry because of this and this and this, and that means you are listening to them. And most important point is first make them realize it is less important when somebody is angry for you to make your point. It is more important to understand their point.
Mm-hmm.
And
if you can kind of step away from it, that's so much easier to do. Because
right.
if you're right in the middle of that battle, you can't do that, because now your human body takes over, and now you're dodging the bullets, and you're getting ready to shoot your own bullets and everything else. But if you can step out of that and look at it kind of as a third party person, then you have the ability to show that empathy and to listen, like you said. And so often when you do that, you find out, I have found out in those scenarios that my initial reason why I started to get upset, angry, probably wasn't even real. I had made a quick judgment on what was going on. And when you're able to walk away and step away a little bit and look at it, you realize, oh, that's not what actually happened at all. This whole thing is based on something that isn't even real, that was a misunderstanding or a miscommunication. So it's so easy very many times to diffuse the whole situation by saying, wait a minute, you think this is happening and this didn't happen. Oh,
Yes.
and the problem is solved. you know,
Human body mode, you are designed to make split-second decisions
right,
because body has to save itself.
right.
So if you are acting in the human body mode, which is the ego mode, you are going to react.
Mm-hmm.
You only get control of yourself when you are in the spiritual mode, when you are in the mode of power mode, which is enlivening you, and it automatically makes you grateful. And then you control the mind through that power. Instead of mind being run by the human body, it will be run by the oneness divine mode, and you have total control. Now, the other side is with the limited time left, we need to talk about what is the benefit. Is anger any times can be used as a pent-up energy? Because when you are angry at injustice done to the human race, you are angry at something which is not adding value and subtracting value, at that point you had to take a stand. I remember when Mahatma Gandhi, after completing his law degree, went to South Africa. He was traveling in the train with first class ticket, and the ticket collector came and threw him out of the train. So says, "You colored guy, you are not supposed to travel in first class." So that made him angry, but he did not uh, go and kill somebody. He organized that this is something which I'm going to take a mission to fight against, but it is going to be done with non-violence, with non, and that movement brought amazing changes to the entire human race. He brought the same movement to India, and as a consequence of non-violent and non-cooperative movement, he was able to throw the most powerful British government out of India and freed up India. So that is the power of anger at the right moment. And that anger really is not to be reacted right away. You have to conceive, and because ultimately you have to put it to the mind and ask the mind, how do I add the highest value? And you are going to find a solution to add the highest value. So in that case, the highest value was bring back the human rights, bring back the right of normal people ahead of the right of British government. So that is how things are done.
And there are, and that's a tremendous example. There's many other examples where good results came out of really difficult situations. You've shared in the past Mothers Against Drunk Driving. One of the strongest groups out there that has made incredible changes in terms of getting drunk drivers off the streets, and ultimately with that saving a lot of lives. But those types of organizations many times were started with, whether it's, you can call it grief or whether you call it anger, because I'm sure that any parent who has lost a child unnecessarily, has got incredible anger inside of them, that how could this happen and why would this happen? And so
see that MAD organization,
yeah,
MADD is Mothers Against Drunk Drivers, was established by a mother whose teenager son was killed by a drunk driver.
right.
So she now passed so many laws and helped pass so many laws in Congress because of her stand and organizing this great organization.
Exactly.
See, the bottom line is this. I remember a quote because we are all in this sort of There's a quote from Martin Luther King, and I quote, "It really boils down to this, that all life is interrelated. We are all caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied into a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly."
Mm-hmm.
And that is why in Martin Luther King's, it was no revenge. He did not want to take revenge from people because he knew that everyone is in the same boat. If I take revenge, I'm basically taking revenge with my own self.
Ratanjit, we'll have to make that the last word here today because we are out of time. But thank you so very much for sharing your thoughts in a loving way, certainly not an angry way, as we explored the idea of anger and how we can better cope with it, how we can less have it and respond better to it and use it wisely under certain circumstances. Thank you so much for being with us again today.
Thank you, my friend.
And thank you to our beloved audience. And remember, folks, we're all playing the same game. Have a great day.